My name is Mary Chabreau. I'm the CEO with the Kitchener Public Library, and I'll be your host for this session. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge the territory that we're on. So as we gather, we're reminded that the library is situated on the land that is the traditional home of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize that the contribution to the Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here and reaffirm our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real in this community. Thank you. Now, it is my delight to introduce today's moderator. Kaylee Platts is a Kitchener-based writer, growing up and working in the Waterloo region, technology and academic sectors. She likes to examine ways in our complex world impacts everyday life. She holds a master's degree in anthropology, and I hope if she has a chance, she'll explain why she chose anthropology, and has defined her career around digital cultures, community building, and brand storytelling. Kaylee is an avid reader who is passionate about library advocacy, is a great friend to Kitchener Public Library. In her spare time, you can find her supporting the writing community and moderating discussions with authors. Kaylee, welcome to the screen. I'd say stage, but screen today.
Hi, Mary. Thank you. Feels weird saying hi digitally, but that's the way of the future. I am delighted to sit down and chat with Genevieve today. I had the opportunity to actually sit down with her in March, the week that her book was first released, and I'm really excited to catch up with her. It's been a busy 6 weeks for her, even in quarantine. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in case it's the first time you have come across Genevieve, and then we are going to get on with the show. So Genevieve Graham is the author of 5 best-selling historical fiction novels, the most recent being The Forgotten Home Child, which has been #1 on the Toronto Star's bestseller list for 5 weeks since it released on March 3rd. Genevieve was born in Toronto and graduated from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor of Music and Performance. She played the oboe, and we're going to ask a little bit more about that after. Genevieve and her family moved from Calgary to Nova Scotia in 2008, and there she discovered how little she knew about Canada's history. Genevieve never considered being a writer until she was in her 40s, but her research evolved into writing historical fiction, which is her favorite genre. She is passionate about breathing life into Canadian history, reaching readers' hearts and their minds. And in case you read The Forgotten Home Child and can't wait for something else, she plans for a new release every year. Welcome, Genevieve.
Hey, Kaylee. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Kitchener Public Library and your Imagine It series. I'm so excited to be here today. I wanted to give you a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to be talking about. The book was all about The Forgotten Home Child is about Canada's British home children, which is a part of our history that not many of us know nearly enough about. So it's a very interesting story that Kaylee and I will talk about afterwards. I'd like to start with reading the first chapter. So sit back and get ready for this. The story is written in dual timeline, and what I'm going to start with is my main character, Winnie, in so-called present tense, which was 2018. And this is the very beginning. My life is spilling onto the street, and I'm as helpless as a child to stop it. Through the living room window, I watch my treasured Ulster coat tumble onto a mound on the pavement, followed by a flutter of faded gray cotton when my frock lands on top. The old woolen stockings, mended so many times, slip out and cushion the books as they fall. Then come my boots. My granddaughter, Chrissy, is staring down at the little pile with a sort of guilty curiosity, but she sobers when she glances toward the house and sees my stricken expression. She stoops and gathers my things, placing them gently back inside the little wooden trunk I have kept with me for over 80 years. As she snaps the rusted hinge closed, I curse the rotted metal for releasing a secret I have kept to myself for so long. Moments later, Chrissy comes into the house and quietly sets the trunk on the floor next to the rest of my things. I'm sorry, Gran, the hinge broke. She puts a warm hand on my shoulder, and I pray she will be able to contain the questions flickering in her eyes. But that's the last of it, she says, and I exhale. I have to go pick up Jamie from school. It's my turn in the carpool. Will you be okay for a bit? She'll only be out for a few minutes, and yet I am glad she asked. I've never been comfortable being alone. The silence is too loud, full of so many voices I've loved and lost. I pat the arms of my chair. Oh, I'll be fine. I promise to sit right here and not die while you're gone. Chrissy frowns slightly, but grabs her keys and heads to the doorway, where she pauses and glances back at me. I'll be fine, I say again, ashamed of my snide remark. I'd only been trying to lighten the mood, but it came out wrong. I'm thrown off by the scene in the street. My gaze drops to the trunk, and I wonder if I have enough balance to carry it all the way to my room and put it away before she sees it again. Out of sight, out of mind. I had hoped the trunk would outlive me, that once I was gone, someone could dust it off, open the latches, and discover the treasures old Gran had hidden away. Without me to tell the story, no one would be able to figure it out. It would remain forgotten, like the rest of us. I watch Chrissy drive away, and my chest tightens with gratitude. My dear granddaughter has become quite protective of me ever since she lost her mother, my daughter, Susan, 2 years ago. Susan and I had shared an apartment, which had suited us both beautifully. Until she'd gotten sick, the high point of our week had been playing bridge at the senior center or shuffling through the mall to see the lights and the people. I should have valued those moments more, but I'd always assumed I would be the one going first. It didn't turn out the way I'd hoped, but I am grateful to have had a long and enduring bond with my daughter. Not all of us can be so lucky. It has been difficult living without her, but it's getting easier. These days, I see Susan less and less as a woman in pain. My memories of her now are when she was so small, she needed to hold my hand everywhere we went. So small, I couldn't resist hugging her on impulse, marveling that she was mine. And his, of course. Just after Susan's 71st birthday, cancer stole her from me, and it was obvious to everyone that I could no longer look after myself. Every morning and every night, my creaking joints and wasting muscles remind me that the sand in my glass is running low. So when I moved from the apartment to the Shady Pines retirement home, I resigned myself to sitting and waiting for that last grain of sand to fall. Shady Pines was not the worst part of my life, but it was not how I'd imagined it ending. Chrissy and her son Jamie saw through my facade and asked if I wanted to come live with them. I jumped at the chance. The two of them are a small but good family, and I love them with all my heart. They have no idea how important it is for me to be with family. It's all I've ever really wanted. The front door swings open, bringing a curtain of fresh summer sunshine into the kitchen, along with my tall, dark, and handsome great-grandson. When Chrissy's husband left her for another woman 10 years ago, Jamie became the man of the house by elimination. Jamie is 16, smart, and the spitting image of his great-grandfather. Hey, Gran, he says, shrugging out of his backpack. Enjoying the new digs? I am, I smile. Thank you. Chrissy bustles in behind him and makes her way to the kitchen. She had set a chicken to roast to celebrate my first night in their house. I've lost track of how many first nights I've had in my life, how many times I've had to start again. Over dinner, Chrissy pries out details about Jamie's day from him, and I listen as he talks about his math teacher, his soccer game, and the fact that one of his friends is getting a car. Jamie is a teenager with teenager things on his mind, but he's a good boy, and he loves his mother. It's easy conversation, and it takes me back so many years. I almost feel like I'm home again. I have homework, Jamie says when he's done clearing the plates. He edges toward the door, his eyes on his phone. I'll see you tomorrow, Gran. Actually, Chrissy says quickly, I wanted to talk about something with you and Gran. He winces, then glances apologetically at me. Yeah, sure. Let's go to the living room. It's more comfortable there. I'll bring cookies. They help me shuffle to my armchair, and Chrissy sets me up with a cup of tea. She's a nurse, following in my footsteps and those of her mother, and she always seems to know what I would like before I ask for it. There's something reassuring in that. She sits beside Jamie across from me. I just thought maybe we could do this sometimes after supper, get to know each other a bit. Jamie's expression is pained, and I can't really blame him. I'm sure he'd rather be doing just about anything other than talking to his 97-year-old great-grandmother. Don't look that way, she scolds, and I see regret in her eyes. It's just that now that your grandma's gone, we can't ask her things about when she was growing up, you know? We can't hear any more stories from her. Don't you ever wonder where our family comes from, Jamie? Unease stirs in my chest. I do not want to have this conversation, but I can hear the sadness in Chrissy's voice. She yearns to know more about her family, about her mom. He gives a weak shrug. I guess, but isn't that what the internet's for? Oh, my life wasn't interesting, I assure them. I can tell you stories about your grandmother, but to be honest, we lived a pretty average life together. Chrissy gestures with her chin toward the trunk, which hasn't been moved since she brought it inside. And I'm instantly reminded of all that it holds. I was wondering if you could tell us about the little suitcase, she says. I don't mean to be snoopy, but it looks like it holds more than an average life. I'm sitting perfectly still, and yet I feel myself toppling backwards as if a lifetime of secrets is unraveling before me. My gnarled fingers curl around the arms of the chair, holding me in place. Gran? Jamie's by my side now, and oh, it is as if 80 years have flown away. My hands unclamp. You look so much like your great-grandfather. The thought sticks in my throat. So much like him. He grins, and again it's as if I'm looking at my husband the way he was at Jamie's age, though he had been underfed and toughened by street life. But when he smiled, he lit up my world. Do I? He settles back on the couch. What was he like? I loved Pop, Chrissy tells him. He was quiet and She pauses, so I help her out. He had a bit of a temper. Maybe, but I didn't see that very often. I was going to say that he was a good man. He always had time for me, and he loved Mom so much. That was obvious. Yes, he did. He wasn't from Ireland, was he? She wonders. I mean, he didn't have the same accent as you. I thought I'd mostly lost mine, I say. I haven't been there in a very long time. Jamie shakes his head. No, you're still real Irish. I wish I had an accent. I wink and reach for my thickest brogue. Come on, you boyo. I'm not the one who'd be having an accent. Jamie grins and takes a bite of a cookie as his mother leans toward me. Mom said your family left for London when you were little. Is that right? And you had 4 brothers? Why did your parents decide to leave Ireland? How long has it been since I thought of my little brothers? I imagine they're all gone now. London was where everyone was going. Jobs, money, a better life. Almost all the English, Irish, and Scots living in the countryside moved to the city back then. Was it better? No, just more crowded. What about Pop? Chrissy asked. Where was he from? Oh, he was from London. Did he have any brothers or sisters? He had a sister, I replied. Then I stopped, unable to say any more. Only one person in the whole world knows my story, and he's been gone for 15 long years. Not even my beautiful daughter Susan knew the humiliating truth about her parents. Chrissy and Jamie are watching me, waiting, and my heart races as if I'm standing at the edge of a cliff. I'm ashamed to tell my story, but now I have no choice. My family deserves a history. As much as I don't want to talk about my past, I don't want them to wonder, as I always have, about their roots. I'm haunted by the truth that I've kept from everyone I know, everyone I love, everyone but him, of course. Nowadays, doctors have words to describe the way our minds can construct a wall to keep it strong, blocking painful memories in order to help us survive. But youth no longer maintains my walls, and I feel them giving way brick by brick, spilling long overdue sunlight onto my truths. I have seen enough days to know we have no say over any of them. Life picks us up and drops us where it will. My friends and I were thrown into a whirlpool, and we did what we could, but we were only children after all. We had no idea how to swim. I take a deep, shuddering breath and stare at the trunk. Oh, I never expected anyone to ever open that trunk. I really am sorry, Gran. I don't want to upset you, and you don't have to tell us anything if it's too hard to talk about. We all grieve in our own ways. I know, sweetheart. I hesitate, daring myself. Jamie, can you put the trunk up on the table here? It looks small in his hands, and the once dark wood has faded to a dull, lifeless brown. It's the size of a small suitcase, like those bags they call carry-ons these days. I still remember when it was my carry-all my worldly possessions in one little box. When he sets the trunk before me, I stare at it, wondering where to begin. I tentatively rest my hands on its surface, feeling the familiar grooves and coarse lines. Like my hands, the wood shows the ravages of time, though not nearly so vividly, and my fingers go to the long, deep scrape on top and the notch in the back corner. The trunk and I both bear scars. I turn it around so they can see the letters of my name carved into the back. I made this trunk when I was a little girl. Jamie looks impressed and he runs his young fingers over the old seams. What's in there, Gran? Chrissy asks. If only she knew what she was asking. The answers will change the way she and Jamie see their own lives. With a sigh, I unfasten the latches and the old trunk creaks open. I haven't looked inside for a very long time, but other than the fact that its contents have been hastily repacked that afternoon, nothing has changed. I pull out an old hairbrush and comb. Then I fold back a piece of material and dig out my copy of The Pilgrim's Progress. Such a terrible book to give to children. I set it aside and sort through the bits and pieces of cloth until I find my soft black leather Bible. This is where I must start, I realize. The cover falls open and I slide the book toward Chrissy so she can see the sticker where my name is printed on the inside of the cover. A memento of the old country from the British and Foreign Bible Society, she reads. Then she looks to the page on the right. Her finger taps a black and white photograph of a stately, spectacled gentleman with waxed ends on his mustache. Who's this? Dr. Thomas Bernardo, I say softly. His name hasn't passed my lips in probably 75 years, and yet I still speak it with a twisted blend of admiration and loathing. I'm afraid I haven't told you the whole truth about our family and how we ended up here. And that's the opening chapter.
Dun, dun, dun. I think I could just keep listening to you read. We'll just do a full reading hour. How's that sound?
Perfect, sounds great.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to chat with you again.
It's very nice to see you, Kaylee. It's been a while. A lot has happened between the last time you and I met.
You know, I think we had a lot of plans for this spring. There were some vacations planned and
I think
now
so.
you're back home. And we have had a rather beautiful day here today, but just for our local audience, you let me know that your weather was not quite as nice at home in Nova Scotia.
I'm in Halifax, and it has been snowing relentlessly all day with huge snowflakes and, well, there's fog now, so maybe it's going to warm up. Maybe we'll just get rain, but it's not Toronto weather, that's for sure. Not Kitchener weather.
Oh. But it's excellent writing weather is what I would say.
It is perfect for writing and for putting together all different kinds of events. But yes, I've been sitting here with my tea and my candle glowing, and I've been writing my little head off today. So yes.
That makes me very excited to hear.
I'm glad.
But we won't start talking about the next book yet. Let's talk about this one, Forgotten Home Child. So congratulations, first of all, on the amazing reception in Canada.
Thank you.
How does that feel to have a story that is so special to you be received like that all across Canada?
It's amazing. The first time, well, the first week, it went to #1. And I remember when they told me, and I just, it was waterworks. Because you never really, my last book came out on the bestseller list right away, but it was #8. And I still was overjoyed. I was like, oh, I've made it. So this book, and this book means so much to me, and it means so much to a lot of people that are counting on me. So I think that with so much support and so many people buying and reading the book, it is accomplishing everything I had hoped it would do. So I'm very, very happy. And yes, it's been 6 weeks to #1 now. We wait till tomorrow to find out if going now. There's a lot of great books coming out, though. I don't know. I can't hold the spot forever. So.
Canadian fiction feels like it's on fire right now, which is
Does.
so good in general.
Yes, it does. Every genre.
I'm going to ask, right? I'm going to ask you later what you're reading, but I do want to talk more right now about how you got from playing the oboe and what you did before you published these books and how you became a historical fiction writer.
It's kind of a funny story. I had never planned to be a writer. I grew up in Toronto, and I did play the oboe, and my dream was to play principal in Toronto or Montreal or, somewhere suitable. And I graduated from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor of Performance. But it didn't take long for me to realize that music wasn't going to work out for me. There were the financing for orchestras was not there where it needed to be, and orchestra musicians everywhere were suffering, as they still are, with unappreciated. And I thought, well, there's got to be something else out there that I fit into. So I actually went straight from music into advertising, which I know makes no sense, but I taught myself to type in a weekend, and then I went and I worked for an ad agency, working for different accounts, which was fun and fast paced, and it taught me a lot. And the thing that happened next was not work related, but I went out at one point in '92 to visit a friend of mine who had been transferred to Calgary. And I flew out to Calgary to see her, and we were supposed to go skiing in Banff that weekend. And she told me at the last minute that she couldn't, she had to go into work. And I said, well, I'm not coming all the way out here and not skiing. So I went to Lake Louise by myself, or actually I went to Sunshine Village, and I was skiing by myself until I happened to hear a gentleman's voice yelling single because he needed a partner for the double chairlift. And he ends up being my husband for the last 27 years. So after I met him, we both moved to Calgary. He's from Northern Alberta, but he came to Calgary. We lived there for 18 years, where we had our 2 daughters who are incredible girls, so smart, so beautiful, so proud of them. And we eventually in 2008, well, the whole time that was going on, I was still using my music degree, but I was teaching piano to neighborhood kids and sometimes their parents, and having a great time with all of that. But sometime around 2008, we decided we were going to move east. And when I suggested east to my husband, it was, I was thinking Nova Scotia all along because I've always wanted to come out here. And he thought I meant Saskatchewan. So we had to go a little farther.
More.
And so once we were here, I was always a historical fiction lover, and I was reading a ton of it. I've read the Outlander series so many times. I've read every historical fiction book I can find. And so that's what I was starting to write on anyway. But when we came here to Halifax and I started learning about, this province is full of history. It's just glorious. And I thought, well, I'm going to learn everything. And the first thing I learned was that I knew nothing because I'd never even heard of the Halifax explosion. So I thought that was just a fiction thing. So I started learning about that, and that eventually turned into Tides of Honor. My first release in 2015 was Simon & Schuster Canada. And after that, I realized how many Canadian stories there were to tell, and so many more that I haven't even found yet. I'm looking for Canadian stories all the time because I figure with historical fiction, we've read everything about Europe and England and the US, and we know all that because they write beautiful stories. But I don't read nearly enough historical fiction about our own country. And as a result, there are far too many stories that I don't know and other people don't know. So that's what I'm writing. That's all I'm writing, Canadian historical fiction from now on. And like you said, about a book a year is what I'm going for. I have a lot to catch up on.
You're going to teach the rest of us too, I think. Do you want to give a bit of a quick summary about the British Home Children and what that is? Because I will admit, before I picked up this book and read it, I didn't know about it. I at first thought, oh, it's like the war children who were sent over and then were sent back to England and were so well taken care of. This is a different time in our history.
Yes. Yeah, when I started talking about it with people, they thought I meant the guest children as well. And I thought, no, that was absolutely the opposite of what happened. The British Home Children, I ran across a story about them in 2017, and I had never heard of them. And anyone I spoke with had never heard about them. And once in a while, I would hear a little voice saying, well, my great-grandfather was a home child. And I thought, okay, I have no idea what that is, but let's research it. And what I discovered was absolutely, I don't know, mind-boggling. It was so hard to believe that none of us have heard about this. So after the Industrial Revolution, when the whole world from the country in England basically came into the city and they were looking for prosperity and hope and a new life, and instead discovered cities that were overrun and filthy and no hope of a job, there was more poverty than anything. That was going on all over the cities, but especially in London. where there were thousands of children who either didn't have parents and were out in the streets on their own or in orphanages, or there were some that were living with single parents and they were helping to work. Some of them were working at 5 years old out in the streets and doing the most dangerous possible jobs. And the mortality rate with children was extremely high. The average age for a kid was not great. So what they had to do was they had to find some way to take care of these kids. And there were some philanthropic groups and benevolent societies who truly did have the interests of the children at heart, I believe, when they started to build these homes for them, not orphanages per se, although there were orphanages, but homes that would provide the children with a safe place to live, good food, clothing, and education. They would teach them trades so that they could go forward and have a good life. And that was going great. And Dr. Thomas Bernardo was one of the lead men in that. There were a lot of women that ran their own organizations as well, but he worked with the most children. But the problem with the scheme was that there was not enough room for all these kids. The flood of children never stopped. So back in 1869, they worked with the governments of England and Canada on a scheme where they could send children to Canada as indentured servants. The people in Canada would pay $3, and the Canadian government would pay $2, and the English government would pay $2. So $7, you could have a kid. And really, it was supposed to be a good thing. It was supposed to clean up the streets, so London and the people of London were going to have a better situation. The children were going to be given good places to live because the people bringing them over were supposed to give them everything that they needed, including school. And it was supposed to help the farmers and the people in Canada that were in need of help. But when you send over 120,000 children across the ocean with basically no adult supervision and send them to rural farms all over Canada, there's just no way to keep track of them all and to make sure that there's checks and balances in place. So out of the 120,000, 130,000 that I've read, probably 25% of those children did very well when they came out. The little ones, the children, the babies, a lot of them were adopted and had good lives, taken into families. And there were some that worked as domestic servants that ended up feeling a part of the family and going on to live good lives. But about 75% of them, the other children, were living in farms where none of the rules were being followed. A lot of the children were malnourished, they were neglected, they were beaten, they were made to feel like garbage or worse. A lot of them died, a lot of them were sexually abused, they were all pretty much emotionally abused. Yeah, they had to survive on their own or not. I read the most tragic stories you could imagine about some of these children. And I think the thing about these kids, that the reason we don't know is because they were made to feel so terrible about themselves, about who they are. From the minute they stepped onto the streets of London, they were called gutter rats by the people that wanted to save them. And then they were brought to Canada, and even the politicians were writing things in the newspapers that they were contagious rats, right, carrying disease, and they were poisoning the fabric of Canada and just saying the worst things. And then to be beaten at the farms, the kids felt so terribly about themselves. Most of them never told anybody who they were. It's only recently, when genealogy became such a big, accessible thing, that people started to realize who they were. And it's now been discovered that about 12% of Canada's population, so over 4 million people, are descended from these children. So it's a pretty amazing number, and most of those people have no idea.
No, that's a huge amount for something we've never been taught about.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I think about learning history in school, which I will admit I slept through. We learned everything. We learned Plains of Abraham. We learned the War of 1812. We learned Louis Riel. We learned a lot of things, but we were never taught about 120,000 defenseless kids that were sent out here and abused. It boggles my mind that nobody dug this up and put it into the curriculum. That's sort of my goal with this. All the descendants, they're like an army working together, trying to get this into the school curriculum, and I'm on side with them.
You think if 12% of us can claim ancestry from it, I think that's something that has to be told,
I think
especially with like you said, in today's day and age where people are starting to track down and ask questions like they do in your book about where people come from. We're very curious about that in today's society.
yeah, and it's what I've found is a great resource is part of what we'll talk, I'm sure we're going to talk about my research, but part of that was joining Facebook groups that were run by the descendants of the children and finding out from them how hard they're working at getting the news out there, but also finding people's relatives for them. So I've been directing people towards their Facebook page where somebody can go on there and say, my great-grandfather, John Smith, came over in 1905 from London, and that's all I know. And within 20 minutes, the volunteers on those pages will have everything you ever needed to know about this kid, his parents, the reason that he was there, just everything. So these descendants are so keen to help people understand who they were. I think it's wonderful.
I think we can post on the Facebook page after the event. So we'll share the links. So if anyone who's listening is interested in learning more, we can make sure they do it.
Definitely.
I'm going to keep on our research conversation. For anyone who has not yet read the book, who might be perhaps getting the book for Mother's Day, because it would be a perfect Mother's Day gift. I would recommend gifting it with a box of Kleenex because I cried multiple times while reading this. I actually started tearing up a little bit when you read the first chapter, just from remembering what was going to happen next.
Yes.
So we are going to keep this spoiler free though, as much as possible, because
it's hard, right? Because you want to talk about particulars, but you can't. No, we can't do that.
But to talk about your research, because that's fairly spoiler free, writing historical fiction in general takes a lot of research, especially the kind of detailed writing that you do. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing process and your research process for how you find these stories and plot them out? And how do you know when you've done enough research?
You've never done enough. The way I work is I'm always looking for Canadian stories. And I can use this one as an example. When I ran across it in 2017 and realized it was a Canadian story, I've read a lot of Canadian stories that are amazingly interesting, but they don't grab me. But when one of them grabs me the way this one did, and none of them grabbed me that hard before, but it's like there's a shift in me that says this is the one, get in there and find out about it. The way I look at research is I start out my research voyage with the library, and I take out absolutely everything I can that's nonfiction about the subject, and I read as much as I can until the nonfiction puts me to sleep. And then I go, and that's what I think of as the black and white history. Those are the facts, and that's faraway history, basically, that you can see from a telescope. And then I go online and I start talking with, in some cases, it's people like reenactors, experts that, they specialize in these things. And I joined up right away with the British Home Children Advocacy and Research Association, and they helped me through it. But I also went onto the Facebook pages and I started reading all the stories and finding out more and more about them. And the more I learned, the more color I was able to put into this vision I had in my head of if somebody's talking about their great-grandfather and how he liked to smoke a pipe or something, and starts to filter into who these people were, and I start to add color. I think of it kind of as, when they colorize black and white photos, and it brings these people to life when you can see their skin tone and you can see what they're wearing, and it starts to fill it in for me. And those are the details. That's the most important part of everything. Because the third part of what I do after I've got all the details and all the facts down is, by that point, I know who my characters are, most of them, and they are telling me what needs to be done. Basically, I can envision them in the story and they tell me what they need. So if we're walking down the street and one of them looks in a shop window, she's looking at me and saying, what am I seeing? How much do these things cost? And when we go home and have some tea, what kind of tea is it going to be? And where did we buy it? And what kind of tea? So the little tiny details. That's
really, really tiny details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With this story, I had extra help because through the Facebook pages, I made a lot of friends, and I went to a reunion out here in Nova Scotia with one of the groups, and I handed out surveys that I'd made for them. The first section of it was looking for just the facts, the names and the dates and all that kind of thing. But the second part of the survey was about what do you remember, or what have you been told about them? What was their character like? Did they ever mention what they missed the most, what they loved the most? And I thought maybe I'll get a couple of responses for that, and it might be interesting to add in. But within 2 weeks, I had over 200 responses. And I cried so many times reading these things because they were so real. And some of the actual situations that I was told in these surveys, I was able to use, so that when you read about the children in the book, they are made up of actual events and actual stories from the people that actually were there. So it made the process extremely personal, and it was
Emotional
very difficult.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of crying. It wasn't just the readers that are crying. I wrote that thing. I knew every word in it, and I edited it every single time I cried. So yeah, it's.
I think there's some terrible things that happen in the book. You put your characters through the ringer.
I do that.
Sometimes unmanageably so. Like, you just want to say, stop, let them have some breaks, let them have some happiness. Knowing that some of these experiences and examples are actually based on real life, real history, makes it all that more poignant.
Yes.
And I think one of the areas that I really enjoyed about this book, which is different from some of your other books, is that you had the dual timelines, which is new for you, not new in general, but new for you, because I felt like it gave me a little bit of a breathing space to kind of figure out and process what had just happened.
Yeah, it was a brand new thing for me.
Can you talk a little bit about how you changed your storytelling a little bit?
Yeah, because I'd never done anything like that before, and I knew it had to be done. And the reason it had to be done was because the descendants who were helping me with the research were a part of the story, basically. They were the ones that are living it now. They weren't the home children, but they are trying to bring in their ancestors' lives. So it's all connected to them, and the discovery of who these children were comes to them. And now it goes out to the reader. So I knew that I had to do a present tense. I had to do Winnie has to look back on her life and see what's happening. And I was really, really grateful to the descendants for everything that they did that made that possible. And so I knew it had to be written that way. So I bookended it with the present tense, and I think it tied it all together. I do, because you see that there is hope as well. There's survival and there's hope, and life goes on most of the time. So.
And I know, I think we've talked a lot about like the crying and a bit of the doom and the gloom. There's also some really beautiful relationships, and there is a rather lovely romance line in this. So for anyone watching, there is, this is not a book that you'll just cry all the way through from sadness. There are some incredibly happy moments. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you wove some of those relationships in? Because some people have very happy, very strong stories. Some people don't get their happy endings. But how did you decide to build those moments in?
I think the answer is kind of a funny one. It's a writer question because I didn't decide a lot of these things. The characters pretty much tell me what to do. It made it easier because I knew the children when they were young, and I saw them growing, and I saw them being friends as kids, and kids just form relationships, right? They can just make friends with the guy across the street in no time at all. Yeah. And you watch children, the way they deal with each other, and as you get older and everything changes, but there's still that core of their friendship inside that you make as a child, and it stays there. So they showed me what they needed to do with their lives, but I could see how they would need to stay friends, how they needed each other, whether they were in proximity or not. They depended on that friend to hold it all together for them. So yeah, I think it's important that you see not just the tragedy. It is important to see these as children, and children sometimes don't even realize things are going on and they're okay with it. Like um, I can say that when the children were on the boat, some of them thought this was going to be a rousing adventure, and they were excited about, they'd been told, go across, and there's going to be men on horseback, there's going to be cowboys, there's going to be adventure, and the kids could get excited about that. But at the same time, you've got characters who read into things a little bit more and say, we don't have any promise of that. So I don't, and you can see their conversations going and how it has to be real. And the only way that I can write that way is because I've done the steps of knowing the details of the history, I can start to see more of how they would think, how people would relate with each other. And the children become a part of me as I write. So I can hear their voices. It sounds a little weird, but I've always thought it's like, to me, writing is like a medium at some point. I've done all the research, but when I do the characters, I feel like they direct me. And I still, even now that they are gone from my computer now, they're still in my heart all the time. I think about them a lot. So I guess that the higher moments, the happy moments that are so important to them, they just had to be there, and the kids showed me where they went. So
I read a stat today in a Guardian article. They interviewed a bunch of authors from the Edinburgh Literary Festival, and over 60-something% of authors say exactly what you just said about hearing their characters in their head as if they're people. So not so odd,
yes,
but definitely happens.
it is an odd sensation though when you first start to deal with it. When I first wrote, and I said I didn't know anything about writing, I'd sort of written a thank you note as growing up, but I had watched videos, like for example with Diana Gabaldon, because I loved Outlander so much. I watched her videos a lot, and I went to see her live a few times, and I listened to her lessons, and what she said was she didn't really feel like she told the story. Her characters came in there and sort of butted her aside and said, this is how it's going to be. And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy, but let's try it. And I remember telling my husband at one point, I'm going to go downstairs and see if I can write a book. And he's just sitting there. He says, okay, well, see you in a couple hours. And I went down and sat in front of our only computer in the basement and stared at it for a while and thought, what am I doing? And I said, just remember, they're going to tell you. So I just had to kind of, it turned into a meditation. And before you knew it, I could feel that. Like I guess I was open to it. And I remember writing things, and new characters would appear that I had never imagined. And you don't belong in this scene, but they did. And as soon as I wrote them in, it worked. So I just learned to listen to the characters. So it's magic, I think.
It is a magical process when you're hitting that flow of them, right?
Yeah, it is.
Now, one of the things that I know when we last talked amazed me was, so you write full time, and when you write, you don't just write for a few hours a day. Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process when you're actually in the book and writing?
Yes, I'm obsessed. That was
the answer I was looking for.
Yes, I am obsessed. Once I've gotten into it, I forget what time it is. I've written 14, 16 hours a day sometimes, and my husband will come in with the meals and say, you forgot lunch and breakfast. Here's something to fill you in before dinner, and I'll come back for your dinner. And I can't walk away from a scene. And I know a lot of authors feel this, that a lot of the scenes or the ideas come to them at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And that happens to me too. My husband eventually got me a pen that lights up in the dark so that I wouldn't wake him up all the time.
That's a cool thing.
Yes, it helped him a lot. Now I've got my iPad and I've got a little Apple Pencil so I can draw things if I need to. But it's I can't walk away from a scene because I feel like I'm in it, and if something's falling, I can't just walk away from it and say, I'll get back to you falling. Eventually, it has to finish. It has to complete itself. And I usually know the end of the day though, because right around 5 o'clock, my husband comes by with a glass of wine, sort of slides it around the side and says, guess what time it is? So that's sort of my going home whistle. So
Can I just say, I think you definitely sat by the right person on that chairlift.
Yes, I did. I did. So
Yeah.
last time he ever got to say single though, because I just snapped him up. I knew it.
It's a
Yeah.
good story. That's going to have to work into one of your stories one of these days, I think.
Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I don't know if I can get up to that. I need a chairlift. I don't know if I'm going to be.
Yeah, well, historical fiction, as our days go on, it's becoming newer and newer. I think someone said even the 70s can now be considered historical fiction.
I read that. Yes, that's
Yeah.
a little scary, isn't it?
That's a little recent.
Yeah. Is it
Very, very recent.
my kid said something about the 90s being retro. I thought, what? That's great.
Now, I'm going to keep an eye on the time. I'm just going to do a quick check because I know we have about 10 minutes left, if you can believe it. I have one more question for you, and then I am getting some questions from Facebook. So we're going to ask one last question, and that is always my favorite question to ask of who are you reading right now?
I'm always reading everything, but I just actually, I don't know why I waited so long, but I just finished Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale, which was incredible. Just loved it. I want to mention one book because I'm really sad for the author, and I want to mention it because I love this book. It's called The Paris Library, and I wanted to help support it, and I will help support it when it comes out, which I believe was supposed to be in May. But because of the coronavirus and everything that's going on with publishing, she's now postponed till next February.
Oh, wow.
So, and I know that's better for her in the long run, but I also know how exciting it is leading up to release day, and then to have it put off for so long, that's a hard thing. So The Paris Library, you can pre-order that one.
Okay.
And I've been reading The Brideship Wife by Leslie Howard, and it's another beautiful book of Canadian history. Mm-hmm.
Good reading. Some good reading for right now if anyone has some time on their hands.
Yes, actually, if I can mention, I have organized a little panel for Thursday over on my Facebook page with 6 historical fiction authors. And everybody should come to that because it's going to be wild and crazy. It's going to be a panel of 6 of us gabbing away. So
Ray.
And
I think that's at 1:00 EST.
Yes, on Genevieve Graham author Facebook page.
On your Facebook. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm now going to turn and ask you some questions live from the audience.
Okay.
The first one is from Dinah Penn, and she asks you, what gave you the courage to pursue your goals? Perhaps to pursue your goals of writing your first book.
Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe I thought I had never written anything like that, and well, partially because I loved it. Once I got into it, I thought this is so much fun, and it's a relaxing process for me. I think the challenge of it is moving towards publishing. So if you can write, and you should write, if you feel the spirit movie, you should write. You just have to stick with it, whether you're planning on publishing or not, I think, because it fed my soul and I couldn't stop. The whole processing question, or I'm sorry, publishing question is a whole different one. But as far as sticking to following my dreams about writing, there was never really a question. I'm stubborn and I loved it. That's what I was meant to do.
So there,
yes.
It's gonna happen. Yeah.
You just have to
always.
If it's your dream, then just follow it. Who's gonna, and a lot of people are afraid to write because they think they'll be judged. You don't have to show it to anybody. But what do you know, if you do, somebody might say they loved it, and you never know where it might lead. Just follow your dreams if you've got that.
I do have another question, but I also have a fabulous comment for you that in the Facebook comments, people are sharing the connections of either their parents or grandparents
Oh,
to home children. So I think you were planning on popping into the Facebook page after, so something for you to look at.
I'm so glad you guys came. I love seeing the descendants come out and say hello.
I have a fun question that has been asked. If you could have lunch with just one author, who would you choose?
Oh, I don't even.
Tough question.
I don't even know, because I would have said a while ago, I would have said Diana Gabaldon because she was my hugest idol, but I've gone to see her many times and I've spoken with her, and then I would have said Susanna Kearsley, but I've toured with her and I love Susanna Kearsley, but I've already had lunch and dinner with her. There's so many. some of the ladies that are coming to the panel on Thursday, Jennifer Robson, I would love to have dinner with her sometime. Kristen Harmel. I read something by Paulina Simons. If you're a historical fiction reader, you will know The Bronze Horseman. And
Yep.
I would love to sit down with her. She fascinates me. And she writes about a whole different part of history that I've never worked with in Russia. And I think Paulina Simons would be pretty cool. That'd be fun.
I like it. I do have another one. They're coming in. Maureen Dinner says that this book would make a great movie, and I 100% agree.
That would be nice.
That would be, so we need to make that happen.
Yes, please.
Debbie Laurie's asking, I'm sometimes walking down the street and start thinking about Quinn. His story really stood out and stayed with me and still pops into my head often. So perhaps not a comment or a question, but more of a comment on some of your characters.
Quinn was one of the secondary characters, and not too many people have commented on him to me, but he was one of the ones that hurt me the most.
Yeah.
His story to me was probably, it may not have seemed it at the time, but it was the most drastic one, I thought. I think it's really important when you're writing to develop secondary characters, because the primary level of characters they're nothing without their friends and their family and the people around them. We're all shaped by our surroundings. And sometimes I even love my secondary characters more in some ways. I loved all of them. I loved Edward, and he didn't get much of a spotlight, but I loved him. And Quinn broke my heart. Thank you, Debbie. So yeah, he was a sweet boy.
He was part of the Kleenexes.
Yes.
Yeah, I will say that. That's all I'll say, but.
Yeah.
I have another one. Do you have a favorite character from the Canadian historical fiction books that you have written? Oh, I always feel like asking favorites is a hard one.
It is hard. It's like, which is your favorite book? Because they're all your babies. Until this book, my favorite character that I had written was Danny Baker in Tides of Honor. I love Danny. I was living in the Eastern Shore of Nova Scotia at the time, and the town that I wrote about, the village that I wrote about, was about 10 minutes away from our house. And I knew the kind of people, how close they were to each other, and how many generations had lived out there. And Danny came from those people, and he was a tough guy with just such a soft heart. And I love Danny. But now this book has changed a few things. Danny is a second place now, because I love Jack in this book very much. And Jack is Winnie too, but Jack is staying with me permanently. I know that. He's got a special spot.
He's such a multifaceted character who goes through so much, and
so resilient.
Yeah.
His character has to change to go with all of this, and he just kept changing. He never broke. He just had to keep adjusting, growing.
Growing, which is really, like you said, it's that same kind of idea of just keeping going on and bending rather than breaking.
Because you think about, what would I do in that situation, and what am I like? Am I like him, or am I like her? How would I react? How would they react? And I think he went through the most of everybody, and he might not have been the most likable at some points of the story, but
none of us are, though.
That's right. But those things shaped him. So.
All right. I have got one last question. I'm getting the last question notification.
Okay.
I can't believe we've already chatted again for so long.
And
okay,
if
so
they want to ask more, they can always ask later, and I'll pop back on and write in there.
That is perfect. Thank you very much. That's very generous. Where is this question? So this is from Brooke Dawkins Murphy. She says she loved your book and learning about Canadian history that she knew nothing about before. She was wondering if you had your whole book outlined more or less in mind before you started writing, or she's kind of asking, are you a plotzer or a pantser?
Yes, I was just.
What do you write?
So I'm basically a pantser in everything I do with my entire life.
That stresses me out so much.
Yeah, it started to get that way. So I think I take a lot longer writing when I'm a pantser. And writing historical fiction, you have to kind of know, well, you do know the history of it, but you kind of have to know where you're going to start and end off. So I'm sort of in between, because I can make plots, and I do have it laid out, and I do write a synopsis and points, but they change all the time. So I don't really know if I'm a real plotter because my plot points just change depending on what my characters have told me to do. So I guess you could say I'm both. I want to be a plotter very much, but it's just not the kind of person that I am. So
You know how to make it work, and it works exceedingly well. So
sometimes I think it comes more from my heart than my head. So I guess my heart's all over the place. So
fair enough. I think I'm supposed to thank you and let you, well, we're going to stay on. Mary's going to come back on and kind of wrap up for us. But thank you so much for chatting. That was so lovely.
it was so nice to see you again.
It was so good to see you again. Hopefully next time I'll see you in Kitchener. You can come and visit and we'll go out for a glass of wine.
I will have a hug for you when we don't have to social distance.
I would like that. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
So Kaylee and Genevieve, I've participated in many of these, and I couldn't believe it when you said, Kaylee, when you said there's 10 minutes left. So you were talking about it being magical. This was completely magical. Thank you again to both of you, and thank you to the audience who signed in to listen to this delightful conversation. Have a lovely evening, everybody.